Don't touch him, he's done enough. The voice cut through the smoke like a blade, low, cracked and final. Captain Myrick's hand hovered mid-air, trembling, as he knelt beside the collapsed German shepherd. The dog's flank rose and fell unevenly, ribs rattling beneath the dust and blood, his eyes half closed but locked on the burning wreckage ahead. Somewhere in the haze, gunfire cracked again, followed by a distant scream that never finished. The village was gone, but not everyone in it. Thunder, they'd named him, because when he ran, the ground seemed to remember the wars before this one. Mirek didn't care about superstition, but even he admitted it. The dog had done more than any man. For 2 years across the mountains and shattered towns of Darenka province, Thunder had walked beside them nose down, tail steady, pacing ahead of mines, sniffing out death before it struck. His presence was so constant, so unwavering, that some soldiers whispered he wasn't a dog at all, but a ghost of the old country, a spirit sent to balance the scales. But today, Thunder wasn't moving. The boy had run out first, a mop of soot-covered hair, no older than 6. Thunder darted after him before anyone else could breathe. There was shouting, a metal clatter, and then boom, the roadside erupted, flinging hot soil and steel into the sky. Thunder's body absorbed most of it. The boy had lived. Mirek lowered his hand. "Stay with me," he whispered, voice buckling. Thunder blinked once. A medic crouched beside them, face pale, hands frozen over his kit. "There's too much shrapnel." "I don't think." "Shut up," Mirek snapped. "He's listening." The dog's ear twitched. Thunder had come to them from nowhere. No chip, no handler, just a half-starved shadow limping into a field base during a siege, slumping silently near the barrels of spent guns, eyes alert. They tried chasing him off. Someone threw a boot. The dog didn't flinch. Then, one night, a young soldier stepped out to relieve himself behind the barracks. Thunder tackled him before he could take another step. They found a landmine, just inches beyond his bootprint. That was the beginning. They stopped locking the gate after that. Now, 3 years later, he was bleeding out on scorched concrete, his fur matted with ash and copper. Mirek looked away, toward the hill. Smoke rolled thick across the eastern ridge, curling like dark fingers through the wind. Somewhere up there, the radio said, were children trapped in a cellar, survivors from the school. But no one could reach them. The whole route was wired. "We can't get through that road," the lieutenant said grimly, walking up behind them. "Command says we pull back. It's suicide." Mirek didn't respond. He just looked at Thunder. The dog's paw twitched. He remembered every time Thunder had trotted ahead of a convoy, every crouch, every tail stiffening at the scent of a hidden pressure plate. He'd saved families hidden in attics, soldiers caught in burning vehicles, old women who couldn't walk fast enough to escape the shelling. Thunder didn't bark. He didn't beg for attention. He just worked, and now, he was dying. Or maybe, not yet. Mirek leaned closer. Thunder's eyes flicked toward him, then toward the distant hill. "You still want to go, don't you?" Mirek murmured. The wind shifted. Somewhere the faint sound of a child crying echoed down the valley. Thunder's tail tapped once against the ground. The lieutenant scoffed. "He won't even make it halfway. He only needs to make it far enough." A silence fell. Mirek stood, brushing the dust from his knees. "Patch him enough so he can stand," he told the medic. "And give me the vest." "The bomb vest?" the lieutenant asked, stunned. Double quotes, "No. The medkit, the one with the beacon. If he gets close enough, they'll see him coming." "You're out of your mind." Mirek didn't argue. He just knelt again, cradling the dog's head. "One last job, boy. Just one more." Thunder blinked again, slower this time, but he didn't close his eyes. The air was thick with heat and silence and the weight of things unspoken. All around them, the war moved on, shouting orders, loaded guns, sobbing villagers. But at the center of it, this moment held a broken soldier, a broken dog, and a question that hadn't yet been answered. Would he rise? The medic slid the vest into place. Mirek didn't breathe, and then barely a front paw shifted. The vest clicked into place with a quiet snap, and for a moment it sounded too loud, obscene, even in the stillness that surrounded them. Thunder didn't flinch. His chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, but his eyes remained open, glassy and bright beneath the grime. Mirek held his face gently, brushing soot from the fur between his ears with the back of his hand. His fingers came away wet with blood. "He'll never make it up that hill." The lieutenant muttered again, softer this time, not with defiance, but with grief. Mirek didn't reply. Instead, he rose and stepped back. A young soldier crouched beside them, barely more than a boy, trembling as he tied the beacon's wire along the side pouch. Thunder had once pulled this boy from a collapsed trench, dragging him out by the sleeve when no one else had heard the impact. The boy was crying now, silent tears tracking through dust on his face. Thunder stirred. First one paw, then another. A stagger. His legs splayed wide, the world swimming beneath him. But he didn't fall. His claws scraped the concrete, his tail lifted slightly, and his eyes turned toward the road ahead. He stood barely. Mirek stepped beside him and pressed his forehead to the dog's, letting the seconds stretch. Go slow, but go far. And then Thunder began to walk. The battalion watched in silence as he limped toward the ruined path that snaked between the mines. No one called out, no one dared. Mirak remained standing, hands clenched into fists at his sides, eyes locked on Thunder's figure as it moved slowly unevenly up the slope. The moment fractured when the first shot rang out. It wasn't aimed at the dog, not yet, but snipers had eyes on the hill. The enemy had seen movement, and they wouldn't risk a breach. Thunder didn't stop. Myrick's radio crackled in his hand, a voice from command hissing warnings. "There's no authorization for this. Pull him back. You're wasting assets. Do you read, Captain?" He clicked the radio off. The terrain grew crueler blackened earth, pocked with shrapnel scars, patches of jagged metal half buried in the dirt. Thunder paused near a broken tree stump, head low, panting. Then, slowly, he moved again. Each step was labor, but each step was forward. Behind him, the medic whispered a prayer. Then, another gunshot, closer this time. Thunder flinched but kept walking. That was when the twist came. A shadow broke from the tree line on the opposite ridge, small, fast human, a girl, maybe 9, maybe 10. She was barefoot, her pale dress stained red and brown, waving both arms. Over her head, "Doggy," she screamed in a fractured voice, cracking with fear. "Doggy, wait!" The entire hillside held its breath. Thunder froze, Myrick's blood drained cold. Another shadow, this one larger, emerged behind her. A man armed, dragging a rifle in one hand, not one of theirs. The sniper line stayed frozen. The child was too. Close. Thunder turned, his head tilted, registering the girl. His legs were shaking now. But he didn't move toward her. He moved in front of her. He placed himself between the child and the gun. The man shouted something in a language Myrick didn't understand. Thunder growled low, guttural from a place deep inside him. The sound echoed, carried by wind and ruin, across the scarred valley. And that was when Myrick understood Thunder was choosing to die standing. The man raised the gun. A single crack shattered the silence, and Thunder charged. It wasn't fast, it wasn't clean, but it was direct. A leap, a collision of limbs and fury. The child fell backward as Thunder slammed into the man's chest. The rifle spun away. Dust rose in a burst of movement. There were shouts, one from the ridge, one from the radio, another from somewhere inside Myrick's throat. Then came stillness again. The child crawled toward Thunder, sobbing now, hands clinging to his fur. Myrick didn't know how she'd survived up there or who she belonged to. It didn't matter. What mattered was the soft green light, now blinking faintly on Thunder's vest. The beacon was working. Command would see it. The medevac drones would triangulate the location. Rescue would come. Thunder lay down gently as if knowing that was his last task. He didn't whimper, he didn't cry. He simply looked down the hill, one last time toward the men he had walked beside through war, and waited. Myrick whispered, "Good boy," and Thunder closed his eyes. The air held its breath. Thunder stood barely. His legs trembled beneath him, each paw hesitant as if the ground itself hurt to touch. Blood darkened the sand beneath his ribs, but his eyes burned steady, focused, on the hill where children waited behind walls of buried death. The makeshift beacon pack hung light across his shoulders, blinking soft blue with every shaky step. It was meant for soldiers. It had never been tested on a dog. Captain Myrick walked beside him in silence, a hand near Thunder's neck without touching. He wouldn't interfere now. Thunder was choosing this same as he always had. Behind them the convoy lay half crippled, half praying. Soldiers leaned out from the husks of battered vehicles. Some clutched photos, others their own helmets, watching as the animal who had guarded them through 2 brutal winters now limped toward fire. No one gave orders. The chain of command had folded under something deeper than rank. In the space Thunder left behind, it was only memory that spoke of how he had stopped Myrick from stepping on a tripwire outside Marinka, how he had crawled into the rubble of an orphanage under shelling to pull out a girl with a broken spine, how he had curled around a freezing man in a trench and simply stayed until dawn broke and the man decided not to put a bullet in his mouth. Now, that same dog limped forward through dust and wire. At 200 meters, he paused. Myrick did too. He crouched slowly behind the husk of a burned-out tractor, raising binoculars to his eyes. His breath caught. The field ahead was a graveyard of old Soviet mines buried decades ago, half mapped, half forgotten. More had been added during the new offensives, handmade and shrapnel-packed. Thunder had only seen this route once before, when they'd pulled bodies out of a collapsed aid truck. It had taken him nearly 2 hours just to chart the safe lines, and now he was walking it again, with no voice to guide, no handler to steady him, only instinct, only purpose. A few meters more, and Thunder froze. Myrick's hands clenched around the edge of the binoculars. Thunder's nose hovered above the ground, tail stiff, one paw raised mid-step. Then slowly he shifted his weight, circling left, avoiding something unseen. A buried promise of death. He continued on. Somewhere behind, someone muttered a prayer in Polish. Another man wept. At 400 meters, the hill loomed larger. Myrick's radio crackled to life. A child's voice, tiny and cracking, whispered through the channel in broken Ukrainian. "Are you coming? Please, please, we can hear the dogs again." Thunder's ears flicked. He heard it too. Myak's throat tightened, and then, in a moment no one saw coming, it happened, a muffled pop, followed by a hissing spark beneath Thunder's front paw. Everyone froze. One soldier turned away. Another dropped to his knees. But Thunder didn't panic. He didn't flinch. He simply shifted back inch by inch, muscles locked, body balanced, and stepped away from the trigger. The spark died. The mine didn't go off for a heartbeat longer. Thunder stood perfectly still. Then, almost defiantly, he kept walking. Mirek couldn't breathe. By the time Thunder reached the halfway mark, the beacon's signal had started pinging. The satellite feed. Reinforcements would now know exactly where the path was safe. If he made it to the ridge, they'd be able to extract the children, maybe even hold the position. But each step grew slower. His legs dragged. His chest rose less with every breath. And still he walked. Mirek leaned against the tractor wheel, eyes locked on the moving speck in the haze. Around him, the world seemed to narrow. Nothing else moved. Nothing else dared. Then, through the cracked headset, a new voice spoke. Female, clear, calm, under fire. "This is Dr. Helena Petrova at the Hillside School. I see him. I see the dog. Oh my God, he's still coming." Mirek shut his eyes. The doctor's voice trembled now, as if something in her chest was unraveling. "We thought no one was left. We heard the blasts. We heard the screaming. But now, there's just him. There's only him." The line went quiet. The wind picked up, tugging ash across the horizon. And Thunder kept walking toward the last children of a burning country, toward the last thing left worth saving. The wind tore through the ravine, hot and bitter with smoke. Mirek shielded his eyes as Thunder stumbled forward, each step a miracle of defiance. The vest clung to his sides, patched with gauze and streaked with blood. Every time he faltered, Myak's heart skipped, but the dog didn't stop. Not when the path narrowed into crumbled ruins. Not when the sound of distant mortar fire echoed like the slow drumbeat of the end. Behind them, the soldiers watched in stunned silence. No one said a word. No one dared. Thunder had become more than an animal. He was the last flicker of courage. In a place that had seen too much surrender, Mirek followed close, but not too close. If Thunder hit a mine, it had to be him alone. That was the plan. The radio beacon sewn into his vest would trigger a drone relay overhead enough for the medics and scouts to locate the cellar where the children were trapped. The only way to light that path was to walk it, step by wounded step. But halfway through the pass, Thunder stopped. His legs shook. He let out a hoarse breath and lowered his body onto the dirt, tongue lolling, chest heaving. Myrek's throat closed. "We don't have time." The lieutenant crackled over the comp. "If he's down, we have to fall back." "No, Mir," whispered. He dropped to his knees beside the dog. "Not yet. Not like this." Thunder's eyes were open, but the light in them flickered. The air shifted. From behind a broken wall came a sudden clatter, stones falling, then a cry. A figure stumbled into view. A girl, not one of the trapped children. Older, maybe 13. Her dress was torn and ash-streaked, a locket swinging wildly at her neck. She froze when she saw Thunder, then Mirek, and raised her trembling hands. Her lips moved, but no sound came. She was mouthing something. "He brought me here," she whispered finally. "What?" Mirek stepped forward. "The dog. He found me, led me through the hills. I was in the school basement. I ran." He followed Mirek, turned back to Thunder. The dog hadn't collapsed because of pain. He had paused, waited, guided one out and pointed toward the others. The cellar wasn't in the village at all. It was here, somewhere in the rocks, beneath their feet. The girl pointed behind the collapsed masonry. "The rest are down there. 12 of them. The door's buried." Mirek moved like something possessed. He shouted into the radio, calling for backup, for excavation, for medics. Shovels clanged, boots thundered, and all the while, Thunder didn't move. He lay curled at the edge of the pass, watching the dust cloud rise from the digging, his tail twitching once as if to say, "There, you see now." Hours passed like minutes. When the old cellar door finally cracked open. The light caught the wide eyes of children huddled in the dark. They blinked, gasped, and one by one stumbled out into trembling arms. Mirek counted them, 11, 12, and then a final sound, a soft bark. From inside. One more. A toddler. Myek's knees went weak. Thunder had known. He'd remembered them all. They brought the last child out wrapped in a coat, crying not from fear but relief. Mirek turned, ready to lift Thunder into his arms, but the space where he'd lain was empty. Panic clawed at his chest. He spun around, scanning the slope, the rocks, the distant road. There. A shadow, staggering toward the rise, toward the eastern path where the last enemy shells were still falling. Thunder had gotten them all out, but he wasn't done. He was going back in. "No," Mirek shouted, chasing after him. But the dog was already too far. The comms exploded with orders. "Get the drone. Target that sector." "What's he doing?" "He's marking the minefield," Mirek breathed. One last act. Thunder was walking into the most dangerous stretch one no man could pass. He limped slowly, pausing just long enough to let the beacon paint his position from above. Every step mapped another yard of safety, a final trail, a final sacrifice. "Pull him out," someone begged. "We can't," Mirek said, tears burning his eyes. "If we call him now, he'll turn around. And Thunder didn't. He just kept walking, straight into the shadowed valley, toward the silence that waited beyond the smoke. By dawn, the valley was quiet. The artillery had ceased sometime after midnight, leaving behind only a low hum wind moving through charred brush, radio static fluttering over the cums, the occasional thump of distant boots pressing through ash. The survivors were safe. The children huddled in wool blankets, sipping warm broth handed out by trembling medics. No one asked questions. No one had to. The trail Thunder had mapped held. The drone footage confirmed it. Every stop, every turn, every shift of his weight had marked a detour around death. Mine after mine, sidestepped with terrifying precision. It was the kind of work usually done by machines. But no machine could have gotten close. No machine would have waited to guide a girl from the shadows. No machine would have laid down in the dirt, bloodied and weak, just long enough to point the way. Thunder had done what no one else could. And now, he was gone. Mirek stood alone at the edge of the clearing, his boots sunk in soot. His rifle hung useless at his side, the sling heavy against his chest. He hadn't spoken in hours. Not since he'd seen the last flicker of Thunder's silhouette vanish over the ridge. Not since the final ping from the beacon had blinked out in the feed, the signal fading like breath on glass. A young scout approached, holding something carefully in both hands. Mirek didn't turn until the boy spoke. "Sir, we found it." The object was worn, cracked, and soot-blackened, but unmistakable. Thunder's collar. The tag was bent, the metal scorched. The engraving was barely legible now. No name, just 2 words. "I serve." Mirek took it gently. His thumb ran across the edge. Once, then again. A faint click echoed in the back of his throat as he swallowed the weight of it. They never found the body, only paw prints deep at first. Then lighter, shallower, until they vanished completely in a drift of soft, untouched dust. As if the earth had chosen to erase them. As if his final steps were meant only to be followed, not remembered. Later that week, the children would leave the camp loaded onto medical trucks bound for the capital. The girl with the locket clutched a ragged teddy bear someone had given her. She refused to speak to anyone but Mirek, and even then, only said one thing before she boarded the transport. He waited until the last one came out. Mirek nodded, unable to reply. He watched the convoy disappear down the mountain, engines grumbling like distant thunder. It would be easy, later, to romanticize what had happened. Easy for the papers to spin their headlines, for the politicians to give medals and pin ceremony photos to proud walls. But none of them had been there. None of them had seen the way Thunder moved, wounded, limping, determined. None had seen the quiet in his eyes as he passed back through fire, not to save but to finish what he started. He hadn't died a hero. He had died a servant. The camp held a small memorial 2 days later. No speeches, no music, just silence and a worn photograph. Someone had captured him once, tail still, ears alert, eyes fixed on something just out of frame. Beneath the photo, Mirek pinned the bent tag. Then he left. He returned to the ridge a week later, alone. The sky was overcast, the wind dry. He stood where the paw prints had last been seen and looked across the valley. Green now, trying to be. Small tufts of grass fought through the soot. A bird called once, sharp and sudden, and the silence that followed was almost holy. Mirek knelt, not to pray, just to be still. He reached into his coat and pulled something from the inner pocket. It was another tag, clean unburned, a spare from the old supply box back at the base. On it, he had carved something different. He chose to stay. He buried it beneath a flat stone, pressing his hand to the earth until the cold reached through his glove. Somewhere, in some impossible way, he hoped the dog had known that he had felt the hands that trembled over his fur, the breaths held every time he paused, the prayers muttered into broken radios, that he had felt how deeply he had been followed by belief, by awe, by love. And then Mirek rose, slung his coat over his shoulder, and walked back down the ridge, one slow step at a time. He didn't look back, not because it didn't hurt, because he knew Thunder wouldn't have. And sometimes, the greatest act of loyalty is letting go.